There seems to be an appetite for some gamers to hunt for a game that can be their forever game. I've not had a title like that in quite some time, so let's chat about it in the comments below. But first, my opinion. I'm Tarmack, and this is Feature Creep. This is a difficult topic for me to really nail down, but I'm going to do my best. When I was but knee-high to a grasshopper, I played video games. The Nintendo Entertainment System was my bread and butter, and of course I tended towards playing a few of the games that we had more than others because they were better, or so I thought. Certain games like Final Fantasy took much more time than something like Super Contra simply because of game duration, much of which was intentional level grind added by the developers. And I played a ton of games, every genre, every major franchise that would come out over the next 2 decades that I could get my hands on. Well, okay, not everyone. I'm still delinquent on the God of War, Deus Ex, and Metal Gear franchises. We used to play GoldenEye in university a lot, but along with all of those games, there was never really a single game that would trump all of them for a significant period of time for me. In and around 2002, I discovered my first forever game. It was a game called Neverwinter Nights by BioWare, and shortly after coming across persistent worlds in Neverwinter, essentially small-scale, privately run MMOs, I would settle in for what was about 2 years of my gaming life spent on a single game. I built game modules at areas, scripted and plotted. I got into server administration, got banned from one of the biggest persistent worlds because the creator got paranoid and ended up having to go and make my own. The persistent world was called Narfell in case anyone in the audience played on any of the bigger Neverwinter servers. I even met my future ex-wife because of it. Your identity almost becomes part and parcel with the game when you have that kind of time invested in a single product. And then Neverwinter faded almost immediately after getting a beta key for the world of Warcraft. Personally, I regret a lot of that time. I met some great people and I don't regret any of that, but there were so many good games that came out that I simply didn't play because I had found my next forever game. And during the WoW days, I genuinely couldn't see the end. I couldn't conceive of a time when I wouldn't want to play World of Warcraft. At least, until the day came when I didn't want to play it anymore. What we've been sold over the past decade, and while it was certainly there before, I think World of Warcraft has definitely been a catalyst to move this along, is that AAA game products can be your forever game. Every single one of them, or so the PR line goes. They'll have hundreds of hours of content. They'll have all of these multiplayer features which will keep you playing. They'll have more ways to compete with your friends and share that all over the place. They'll take your money and time in such a way as to ignite the sunk cost fallacy in even the most stalwart player. The sunk cost fallacy, for those who are unaware, is the tendency for people to justify keeping doing something because they have spent so much money or time on it, and to stop would mean losing that investment. It's kind of like when you see an advertisement for a type of food claimed to be fat-free, but it wouldn't have any fat in it anyways. Or the recent advertisements of McDonald's chicken nuggets, which are all of a sudden marketed as preservative-free. Over a period of time, by not challenging these silly advertisements, we're now essentially stuck with a situation where consumers have no choice but to become very well informed because everything is bullshit, not just some of it. This is part of the problem with No Man's Sky. It's also the problem with Star Citizen. As a result of a few forever games, things like World of Warcraft, Minecraft, League of Legends, Dota 2, some gamers are looking in advance to find their next forever game. And game marketing is more than happy to oblige. In No Man's Sky, you were going to be able to do anything. We'll talk up a big game, bigger than a small team could ever make, and because some people are so hungry for a forever game, they bought into the hype. I'm in no way blaming the gamers. Dishonesty is wrong, and in this case I believe it to be illegal, or at the very least well within the purview of advertising standards naughty lists. It does, however, add to the narrative explaining why the marketing worked, why too good to be true became a perceived likely outcome. No, it's not your fault that you got lied to, but you can improve your chances in future of avoiding that by being more skeptical. Conventional wisdom in the movie industry is that any movie over 2 hours in length is simply dead out of the gate for the most part. One of the reasons for this is that a writer needs to keep the viewer engaged through the setup, into the conflict, and then through a relatively short but satisfying resolution. The conflict needs to be a majority stakeholder in narrative design for this reason. If the setup is too long, people lose interest and don't get to the exciting part. If it's too short, important information is likely missing. People can also only sit for so long before they need a bathroom break, which granted isn't a problem video games have, so long as you can pause the game. I've sent a query out to howlongtobeat.com requesting some data, but as yet haven't gotten a response. So while I can't crunch much for hard numbers on this, I suspect that with the average gamer age in the mid-30s and video games being a culturally acceptable pastime now instead of being just for kids like they were 20 years ago, that on average, the core of games are getting shorter. Obviously, this applies mostly to narrative-driven experiences and makes the most sense in that area. But as artists and creators are often wont to do, each thinks their creation is an amazing wonder to behold, and when propped up by shareholders looking for the next World of Warcraft, it's easy to see why some of the biggest blockbuster titles have gravitated towards online experiences ad nauseum. And to leverage the point about gamer age, wouldn't it make sense that the core game begins to shorten so that the 30-somethings and above who have limited time due to careers, family, and such can actually finish games? The game is then padded out with nigh infinite trash content which appeals to the under 18s who have far more free time. The thing about forever games is that for the most part they are a lightning strike, but that lightning was so lucrative that the attempt to replicate the success has actually caused significant damage to the level of quality of video games today. Now every single player game has to have things like multiplayer, other online features, open worlds with nary an NPC to be seen, crafting systems because those are always so engaging, and such. In short, ways for players to entertain themselves because the base game isn't worth $60 price tags and gamers need to be able to justify their purchase. It's even difficult in many cases to argue that we have real choice because in some genres there are only a few games, all with this plethora of padding. As an aside, if you're a game developer working for any of the major dev studios, I would love to pick your brain about the intentional addition of padded content. Your anonymity for speaking with me is absolutely assured, on my honor, as a Canadian. Take Watch Dogs for example. As a game with a linear plot, it would have been quite good, Aiden flat character Pierce notwithstanding. The hacking minigames wouldn't have overstayed their welcome. The generic-ish plot could have been carried out with much more player urgency, giving real impact to what story it did have. But instead, it became just another Grand Theft Auto clone by filling itself to the brim with garbage. The act of opening the world up took so much attention away from making the game great that in turn, we got a very mediocre title. Admittedly, I reviewed Watch Dogs and upon further retrospection vehemently disagree with my 8 out of 10 rating. Turns out reviewing games takes skill, one that I'm working on. Meanwhile, a game like Portal knew exactly what it needed to be. It had enough humor and intrigue, but didn't in any way overstay its welcome, and they charged appropriately for that experience. What would you rather spend your money on? 3 $20 games that were all reasonably short, but packed with fun the whole way? Or one $60 title that is at least half full of mini-games and fluff content designed specifically to make you feel like there's lots to do, but you never go do because it's boring. Or you force yourself to go do it because you spent $60 on the game and will damn well get your money's worth. And from the game industry side, is that $60 blockbuster such a good idea? Especially when it's such a risk to spend untold millions developing this massive game which could turn out to be a flop. Whereas if that risk was spread out over 3 smaller games, well, it all comes down to do you want to spin the roulette wheel with all of your money on 17, or maybe spread the chips out a bit, Devolver Digital style. This leads me back to the forever game, a term I think I've appropriately coined here. It's worth acknowledging that a fair portion of forever games happened by some degree of accident for the most of us. We didn't find them by looking, we stumbled upon them and liked the decor so much that we stayed. What bothers me a bit about this is the idea that a forever game is desirable. For those who have a few hundred days played of World of Warcraft, what proportion of that time would you wager was actually having fun, versus using it as a glorified graphical chat interface, waiting for something fun like a guild dungeon or raid to happen? How much of that fun did you end up creating for yourself, that the game had only a passing mention in what happened? This is largely what is sustaining Grand Theft Auto 5, for example, with its hundreds of millions of dollars in digital spending every quarter. Player-generated fun. For those out there who can genuinely enjoy a game like League of Legends every day where it's purely a skill play, grinding for rank, I suppose I envy you a little bit. For me, games need to have more quality stuff in them, but with less time spent making fluff content. I think that for me at least, and probably quite a few others, searching for a forever game is a fool's errand. Because a forever game tends to be little more than a sandbox in which I'm expected to entertain myself, and that's not what I pay game developers for when buying a product. Short of The Witcher 3, I'm not excited by games that advertise 60, 80, 100 hours of gameplay because in the end, most of it is as shallow as a half-empty cup of water next to the kiddie pool at Disneyland. Are you currently engrossed in a forever game or have been in the past? Let's chat about it down in the comments. I'd also like to apologize for the lack of content over the past 2 weeks. I went to Vegas and came down with the Nevada variant of Con Flu when I got back. You might even be able to hear a bit of that in my voice. Also, I've set up a Discord server with an invite link in the description so you can come chat. There's even a shiny backer-only chat room for discussing future feature creep topics, so check out the Patreon link. I know, it's shameless self-promotion, but if I can't promote myself on my own videos, where can I do it? It's not like I'm big enough to get sponsorships for easy website design boxes full of nerdy shit or foam mattresses. Thanks for watching. That's all I have to say. Tarmack out.